All right, welcome to another expert interview. Really excited to have Mark Hutchings on today. Mark's a good friend. He's an amazing insurance broker, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So let's jump straight into it. Mark, tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Hey, thanks, Devin. My name is Mark Hutchings, as you said. I'm an independent insurance broker, and I specialize in commercial lines. So that means insurance for local businesses. I do things like property and liability insurance. I've been doing this for about 12 years. I started Statement Insurance, though, at the beginning of this year. I worked for a large broker for the first part of my career and decided to get out there on my own and started Statement. So here we are.
Love it, man. Well, congrats on that move. Excited to see you growing. Let's talk trends. I always like to ask the question. So what's trending in the commercial insurance space? What are some of the hot topics?
I mean, like everywhere, COVID's a hot topic. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was how does COVID impact I have my business income coverage and those claims not being covered because of COVID. So that was sort of in the beginning, everyone was talking about that. There's still a lot of ongoing lawsuits surrounding some of those COVID exclusions. So I'm sure that'll play out still for years. But now we're seeing a lot more with, employers dealing with things like vaccine mandates and mask mandates, and how do you deal with that in your workplace? I've had clients who have done vaccine mandates and required it of their, or done the vaccine mandate or show you have a negative test. So trying to navigate all that with the HR laws, trying not to get in trouble, do the right thing for your employees and your customers. So it's been interesting to kind of watch all of that evolve. Issues nobody's ever had to deal with, and they're constantly changing. So that's been a really interesting thing to navigate in our world.
Well, and it's hard too, because it's a conversation that no one necessarily has a right answer for, whether that's HR, whether that's insurance, because everyone's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and when you think you're doing the right thing, then a new rule will come down, or a new, it's a whole, you see the debates online every day about, the CDC says this, and then what does that mean you need to do? And at the end of the day, the rubber really hits the road for a small business owner who's trying to say, okay, I don't want to get sued. I don't want to, do something that's going to alienate my customers or my employees. So it's really tricky waters to navigate in. So I just try to share information as I get it. I've tried to do it throughout the pandemic. I can't claim to be the expert on COVID or, COVID related ever changing laws. So I just try to share information, pass things forward, and work with good local attorneys too to help advise customers.
Love it, man. So let's talk about communication in your insurance agent, right? So this is something I'm always advocating for. Is I think that having an amazing relationship with your insurance agent, insurance broker is one of the key relationships you have to have. Can you speak to that? Maybe what that looks like if someone's using Joe Blow off the street versus someone they really know versus a broker versus a captive. Maybe just kind of talk about like what that experience might look like and how important it is.
Yeah, I think it's essential. I mean, at any step of the business process, anytime you make a major change to your business, you want to talk to your broker, make sure that your policies are reflecting that. One thing I always try to point out to my customers is, as a business owner, you have expertise in the area that you have expertise in, whether you're in construction or you're a CPA, and we all are limited by our own life experience. The nice thing that you can get from your broker is, and because we have access to all these different insurance companies, is that we can get a bigger view. We can look at it from, the experience of these insurance companies who insure thousands of framing contractors. And so they're going to see the common problems and help you identify a problem that maybe you've never seen in your career, so it's not on your radar to look out for. And then we can talk about it and say, look, I know it hasn't happened to you yet, but this is the third most common thing we see happen to somebody in your industry. So there's really a lot of free information available to customers if they'll just take the time to reach out to their broker. My most successful clients are the ones that do lean on me for that kind of information. And then they take that back, and with their attorney and their CPA and their other trusted people they bring around the table, they make decisions that way. So I think that's a great resource you can use for your broker, is just say, hey, get me some information about this problem we're having.
I love that. And I love that you talk about changes in the business too. If you're adding vehicles, if you're changing locations, if you're making a big expansion, if you're adding employees, all these things trigger different types of coverage that will be needed or adjusted.
Yeah, or it can you may have an exclusion that when we met 2 years ago and wrote the policy, you weren't working in this area. So the exclusion didn't matter, but you decided to branch into this new area of your business. And you want to, first and foremost, I always say, let's find out if it's excluded. Maybe you don't need more coverage, but we just need to work through that and maybe switch you to a different company who's willing to write it, or maybe it's excluded and you're okay with it. I have that happen too. I always say the correct answer isn't always buy more insurance, but it's just understanding your risks, understanding what's covered and what's not, and how you want to address it, whether it's through buying insurance or you can address things through internal risk management as well.
I love that. And that is a good point, right? Like, especially on the comp side, right? Having good risk and safety programs and the correct PPE, all that stuff's going to help. And I'm sure you've got resources for your clients too.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's all kind of on the front end, that you kind of control all that. I heard I guess it's an analogy from somebody who's been in the insurance industry for a really long time. And he's the CEO of an insurance company that's known for handling like the worst risks. Like if nobody else will write your coverage, you send it to this guy and they'll charge you an arm and a leg, but they'll get you the insurance they need. And he said that your company is like a racehorse. And the job of the insurance company is to deal with what comes out of the back end of the racehorse. The risk management is all those things on the front end. So, that's kind of in the control of the business owner, and we can help with that. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some stuff to deal with, and that's what your insurance is for.
I love that. So it sounds like, if someone's listening to this and they're starting a business, obviously they should talk to you and get things dialed in. If they're running a business, they should be talking to their broker. I mean, I think that it comes up on renewal, but how often do you recommend that they reach out to their broker and have a conversation?
I like to talk to my clients at least, we'll usually meet 90 days before the renewal, then at the renewal again. And then I usually like to talk, most of my clients I talk to throughout the year, but usually we'll have at least one other meeting, maybe 6 months in, or 4 or 5 months in. I don't like to go the whole year. Especially if they're a growing business, they're always making changes, new things are happening. And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, they forget to tell me. Everyone remembers when you buy a vehicle, but they don't remember the other little things that go along with that, because you have to get the insurance card to get it registered. So yeah, I think at least 3 times a year, you should be, at least having a phone call and just talking about what direction the business is going.
I love that. So let's talk price, right? So when we're buying insurance, we should just always buy the cheapest, right?
Absolutely. No. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, but you need to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, right? That's the nice thing. That's the reason I became an independent agent instead of being, working for one insurance company, is that I'll sit down with you and help you determine, okay, here's the coverage we want. And then I can go out to the whole insurance marketplace, shop that out, get 10 different quotes for you, figure out, is the cheapest one the best, or a lot of times it's the second cheapest or the third cheapest because there's coverage nuances there. But we can sit down and have that meeting, and then you can make an informed decision as a business owner and not just buy the cheapest. That I think is the biggest advantage to having a broker, is just that advice and knowing how to navigate the marketplace.
Well, I love that. And I think that, that was definitely a setup question, right? Because I know as a business owner, we are conscious of price, and insurances aren't necessarily cheap, right? And if you're in a higher risk industry, I mean, it can get expensive. But I think having a broker who's making sure you're properly covered, that should be your main goal. And then in that process, yes, you want to look for where can you save and what's affordable. But again, making sure you're buying something that's covered. So I love that you gave that process of, sitting out the broker and looking at, hey, here's 3 people that'll write this the way we want it. Let's talk about the companies. Let's talk about their pricing structures. Let's talk about, is it, pay up front, pay as you go? Is there a retainer? Is there an audit? Like there's some different, structures that might make sense for the business. So I love that.
Yeah, and there's a lot to consider there when you're looking at the companies. I mean, at the end of the day, the companies set the price, but in a certain sense, they don't. If you're a roofing contractor, you're going to pay more for workers' comp than somebody who's an accounting firm. So the pricing, to a degree, is set by the claims. And everyone, eventually, if they write enough business and have enough clients, they're going to experience about the same amount of claims. Now, maybe they're better at picking who they do business with, and that's where the safety and the risk control comes in. But the pricing is kind of set by the industry you're in. Now we can bob and weave and try to find you deals and carriers who are carriers are always going up and down on the prices. When they're profitable and they want to try to earn more business in that area, they're going to lower the price and try to bring more customers on board. And then inevitably, because they lowered the price, their profitability gets worse. There's more claims. So now they have to raise the price back up, and then customers will leave, and they'll be left with just the best customers again. And so the cycle just repeats itself. And so we try to get you on the right side of that curve. I may place you with a company, and for 3 or 4 years, that might be the best company for you. But, eventually they're not going to be. Somebody else is going to come into the market, or this company is going to change their rating structure, and you're going to need to make that move. And that's the other advantage with a broker. I still know your business. You don't have to try to explain it, re-explain everything in your history. I'm quoting insurance every day, and so I always have a good feel for when those changes are happening. I see the notices for rate increases come along. I see sometimes I'll lose a deal. I'll have a customer with a particular company, and I'll lose them to another broker who wrote it with another company. So now I'm seeing kind of the trends in the marketplace. Hopefully I'm on top of them. Every now and then I get surprised, and you lose one that way, but that's still information that then I can bring back to my customers and say, hey, we need to move over here. So a lot of advantages there.
Well, and I love that because they have a relationship with you, the person, not the carrier, right? And I think that if we're talking about people who don't know a lot about the commercial insurance world, right? Maybe you're new to business or you just really haven't dug into it. I think on the personal side, which you can still have brokers for personal, but I think often on the personal side, we choose a carrier, we choose an insurance company because of their marketing or the timing made sense. And we just stick with them because they, throw these loyalty programs and stuff at us, which at the end of the day, after working with a broker on the personal side, like that's a bunch of BS too. But, so I think that that's like a transition mentally. If you guys are talking or thinking insurance and you look at your relationships, like your commercial insurance relationship should be with a person, right? You should have a broker, an advocate, someone that knows you and understands your business and what you're trying to do, advocating for you to carriers versus just picking a carrier, because then who you talk to is going to change every day. If you have a claim, you're going to get lost, right? There's not someone that's there to walk you through it.
Right. I agree 100%. I'm a little biased there, but I think that's the main advantage is you have an advocate. You have an advocate on the front end as far as that pricing and purchasing the policy. But then a big part of what I do too is also advocacy on the claims side. So I'm a customer of these insurance companies too, in a way, and I'm a bigger customer than you are as the individual business owner. So when you have an issue with a claim, I'm able to one intervene with a claims adjuster. A lot of times claims adjusters are just like any other job. Maybe they've been there for 15 years and they're great at it. Maybe this is the first claim they've ever handled on their own and they don't even understand the coverage yet. So I do a lot of pointing out things in the policy, going over language with adjusters. When you submit that claim and get a denial, then I can go in and advocate on your behalf. And then because I'm a broker, I have relationships as well on the sales side of the carrier. So if my agency is controlling $2 million a year in premium with a particular insurance company, and they know I can move those clients to another insurance company. So we have a little more leverage than the individual insurance owner business owner, where I can go in and I've had to do it a few times in the past and work through the sales channel and get to that regional vice president who can turn the no in claims into a yes. So sometimes you need to be able to have that relationship because the insurance company doesn't want to tarnish their $2 million a year relationship with our agency over a small claim. So claims advocacy, I don't think you can get that as much from a captive agent because they're essentially almost an employee of the insurance company. So once they get the no, their hands are kind of tied.
Yep.
So as a broker, we can use that leverage to your advantage. And I always tell my customers, that doesn't mean that we're going to do that every time. Like it's only if we look at the claim and we think that there's a valid case. A lot of claims end up weird and they fall into a gray area. And I always tell my carriers, when there's a gray area, I expect we're gonna fall on the side of our clients, not on your side. So just be ready for that. But over the years, I find most insurance companies are pretty reasonable. Most claim dissatisfaction, I think, comes from the person not understanding the policy they bought and their broker not making sure the coverage that would be important to that customer is included in the policy. So, but that's what we can do as brokers is we can really use that leverage to fight for you for claims. So
I love that. I love just like, again, I always want people to understand, like, if you're spending money with a vendor, let's make sure you're spending it correctly and you understand what you should be seeing and feeling in return. So that's why I want you to understand this. And I was excited that Mark wanted to do an expert interview, because I think, business insurance is a big line item, right? Especially depending on the industry you're in. Like, it can be a big part of your business. If you're in construction or trucking or logistics, I mean, it's going to add up, so it's important you understand that. So let's talk about coverages. So, we've got general, we've got workers' comp. Like, what other commercial insurances are out there that businesses should have or maybe don't have that they should look at, or, exclusions or additions, or just kind of in general, like, give us a rundown.
Sure. So the most common gaps I see when I look at a business is there's coverage now. You see it in the news for cyber liability and data breaches. So if you're in an industry where you're collecting people's personal data, doctor's office, attorneys, CPAs, but then even if you're accepting credit cards, you have some exposure to that. Because a lot of people think if the credit card company has a breach, that's against them, not against you. But you are liable as the business owner because you're the one that collected my credit card and used that credit card service. I didn't ask you to do that. You're the one that picked that credit card service that had the breach. So cyber liability is a big one. If you're just, a restaurant or a retail store, it's not expensive. It's a small add-on to your business owner's policy, but it can really save you. But if you're somebody in a higher risk industry where you have that personal financial or health information, it's really critical because those claims can get very, very expensive. So that would be the first one, data breach and cyber liability. The other one I see missing a lot is employment practices liability. This is a hot topic during COVID too. This is what covers you as an employer if your employees sue you for something like discrimination, sexual harassment, wrongful termination. Anytime your employees go and get an attorney and try to come after you for something like that, employment practices liability is what covers those kind of things. So these can be standalone policies, or they can just be built into your package. And I see them missing a lot, or I see them with really low. Some insurance companies provide you like a $10,000 limit automatically. That's basically not going to get you anything.
Yeah,
and they don't tell you, for an extra $50 a year, you could have tripled that, or bumped it up to $250,000.
Yeah, been able to pay for the attorney.
Right, actually, more than just having to write one letter. I would say that's like letter writing coverage. If you get a letter from an employee's attorney, this will pay for a letter response, and then after that, you're pretty much on your own. So if that makes the lawsuit go away, great. But those lawsuits, when they do happen, they're really costly. It's a lot of defense costs. It can cost a lot to prove that you're right. It costs even more if you were wrong. But either way, when those claims do happen, they usually are six-figure losses for most companies. Yeah.
Well, I love to hear that. I love those examples because, again, just stuff that we want people to hear, just so it's like, hey, do I have that? And go ask the question, right? Go ask your agent, like, hey, is this something I need? Go have that conversation, and you got to look at,
because there's a lot of need to have that you have to go get your workers' comp. You have to get the auto insurance. If you have a lease, you have to get your general liability. Yep. But then there's a lot of times get neglected are the things that protect you, but nobody's requiring you to get them. So that's a big area we try to look at.
I love that. Are there any like standard policies where you see under coverage, or, I mean, is everything pretty standard there? Is there something someone should look at or ask about?
Property insurance, everything's gotten more expensive. Cost of construction's way up. So just about every building owner's policy I've looked at recently has been very underinsured, by 30, 40%. So if you don't have that right coverage, I looked at one, it was an apartment complex down in Carson City recently, and it was, I think, 22 units. And after we looked at it, I said, well, the good news is if you have a fire, you'll be able to rebuild about 12 units. So, it was about 50% underinsured from where they should be. So you definitely want to review those a lot. You need to keep up with your costs. I did another one. A client bought their policy where they just got the insurance when they opened, and then they hadn't talked to their agent since, and it's been about 4 years. Well, at the time they had about $50,000 in inventory, and now they have $300,000.
Oh gosh.
So just staying on top of those little things every day, not every day, but regularly throughout the years, those are huge areas in property coverage where I see gaps.
Love it. What about industries that are hard to write? Like what options do people have if they're in, I don't know, cannabis might come to mind as an industry that might have some hard issues. Like, are there other industries that might be harder to write, and what are people's options there?
Logistics is hard. Trucking, anything, any kind of business where you're driving big trucks. One of my large clients at my last agency had a fleet of 100 large trucks, and they were in Las Vegas, which has some of the highest rates in the country, some of the biggest claims in the country down there. So trucking in any form, whether you're an actual trucking business or they were a distributor, they just had a lot of trucks. That's gotten really challenging. The lawsuits, when I first got in insurance a decade ago, it was rare to see like a $100,000 claim was a big one. Well, now we're regularly seeing auto accidents go above the $1 million liability limit and get into the umbrellas.
Jeez.
So it's really caused a lot of price increases in the umbrella or excess liability market, because it used to be $1 million. It was unheard of to go past the million. It was really rare when that happened, and now it's happening regularly. And so you're seeing big price increases on the umbrellas, and they're actually getting hard to place for certain types of companies. There's just not enough capacity in the marketplace. So really interesting things in that area. And so, yeah, logistics, anything with trucks is a tough market. You mentioned cannabis. Cannabis is getting easier in some ways as it gets legal in more states. We're all hoping it becomes federally legal, so that then it can just be anybody will write it. But there are a lot of programs now. A lot of them are backed by companies like a Lloyd's of London or somebody, but they're getting more. There's more competition in the marketplace. The first time we wrote a dispensary, there was 2 options to get quotes from.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, and now there's a lot more. So it's
okay.
Definitely a developing marketplace.
So let's talk work comp for a second, only because I was in that space for a little bit, and I know there's a couple questions there that like I had to learn because I didn't know the industry. And maybe let's just talk about like what is an experience mod, right, or a rating, and like why is it important and how does it impact your insurance? Because I think that claims management, again, if you're in an office environment, this may not be as relevant of a conversation for you, but if you have people doing physical work in any way, shape, or form where they can cut, slip and fall, they're on ladders, they're swinging a hammer, they're using tools, machine shops, manufacturing, logistics, all these things, an injury can start adding up, and then the long-term impact on your comp can be significant. So can you kind of give us an overview of what work comp looks like and how it works?
Yeah, you really want this to get boring, don't you, Devin? So you mentioned your EMOD. So, and I said earlier, like claims are kind of the same, regardless. I don't want to say regardless of company, but there's an average of claims, and so they know when you submit a painting contractor in the state of Nevada, there's the rate, the average rate that's out there. And then each company, if your claims are above or below the expected, they call it the expected loss ratio, how many claims they expect you to have for this particular type of worker. If your company goes above the average, so the average isn't 0, they know there's going to be some claims. But if you go above that, then you're going to get surcharged on your EMOD. Your EMOD is, everyone's EMOD starts at 1. Yours is going to start to tick up and go to 1.1, 1.2. So basically your $10,000 premium, if you have a 1.2 EMOD, now that becomes $12,000. On the other side, if you have lower than average claims, you can start to earn a discount, and it can go down to 0.8. I've had clients down at 0.6. I've had clients as high as 2.5 on the other side, so you go from, they went from $60,000 a year. Now they were up pushing $200,000 a year. So your EMOD is something really to look at. And like I said, you don't have to think as a business owner, oh, if I ever have any claims, then, all is lost. You really need to understand what your ELR is and what the claims are expected, because there's no way to eliminate them altogether. And then the other thing I would say for business owners is insurance companies and the EMOD rating. It's a super complicated, math equation that figures out that EMOD. Repeated small claims are going to hurt you more than one large claim. We call it frequency versus severity. Frequency is always going to be frowned upon more and hurt your EMOD more than having one big $100,000 claim. Because frequency to the insurance company says there's a lot going on here and people are getting hurt all the time. They're not being very careful. The one big one, they understand that that's what insurance is for and it's going to happen. And you're going to get dinged, but not as badly as if you have a whole bunch of small incidents.
I love that. Well, thank you for not putting us to sleep. That was a great, concise overview.
Right.
but it's good. No, I want to ask the question because I know as I got into the industry, having owned businesses and then getting into that side of the industry for a little while, that was something that like I had to learn because I didn't understand how expensive it can get if you let your claims get out of hand, if you have high frequency, like there is a direct cost to that on the back end. Not, we didn't even get into the employee side of it and retention and safe culture and all that, but like just flat money, it's going to cost you money.
Yeah, and well, one of the things we can do, again, is one of the services we provide in the workers' comp arena is one, making sure your employees are classified correctly. That's probably the most common workers' comp mistake I see. I met with a company last month and they had their labor code, but then they didn't have a clerical code. And they had 3 people in the office who they've been paying the labor code rate for years, ever since they opened. And so we're allowed to go back 3 years and dispute all the audits. So besides saving them, I think we're saving them $3,000 a year going forward, we should be able to go back and recover that same $3,000 for the previous 3 years and correct all of that. And then that impacts your EMOD as well. I had a company who had a really high EMOD, and when we went back and looked at the historical data, the insurance company hadn't reported a big chunk of their payroll one year. And so it made that balance of claims versus payroll look really bad because they were missing so much payroll. So again, we just went back, reviewed the EMOD, brought it down, and that was like a 30% cost savings just because the EMOD, we could have left them with the same insurance company and the price would have come down by 30% because the EMOD was so wrong. So having a broker that understands kind of those nuances of classification and EMODs, again, is a huge benefit, especially if you're in an industry where you're paying an arm and a leg for workers' comp, 5, 10, 15% of payroll. That adds up really quick.
Well, and it's crazy, right? I mean, those are real numbers, guys. Like, I know if you're in an office environment or something that's low risk, like this may not be as relevant for you, but I mean, in some of the policies I saw, I saw some 6-figure worker comp policies and it was like, my goodness, like that's a lot of money. And it's something that, you want the right person advocating for you and making sure the calculations are correct and the audits, which you mentioned, are done correctly, right? Like, are we actually in the right code? Are we covered correctly? And vice versa. Are we trying to save money, but then actually digging ourselves a hole because should we have a claim, we're going to have issues because we're not covered correctly. So that's the other side of it too.
Yeah, I picked up plenty of clients over the years who were upset after an audit because their agent wrote them in a code that was cheaper to win the business. But then when the auditor came at the end of the year, the big audit bill came due. And, like I said, you can't cheat the rates. The rates are what they are. So at the end of the day, the business owner had to pay that big audit and pay the big renewal because now they had to be in the right class code. So instead of being able to spread that cost out over the course of the year, they had to pay $30,000 all within 30 days to pay the audit and the new policy. So yeah, classification is a huge one where you see, again, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I see it more with captive agents because they're limited to what their insurance company can write. And so if they want to get your business, sometimes the temptation is there to say, okay, look, I'm going to class you as this, even though I know, that maybe a different classification is more appropriate, and see if they can get away with it. So that's first thing I do when I look at and you're with the captive agent is I look at the classification you're in.
Well, and I think
a lot of times I'm surprised because generally they have pretty conservative, we call it their appetite. Generally, those companies are pretty conservative in what they'll write in the business world. So, when I see a framing contractor written with State Farm, first thing I do is say, okay, let's look at the classification and what's going on here.
Well, and I think to your apples to apples statement earlier, like I think that applies to all insurance policies to make sure you have the right coverages because I can sell you cheaper insurance with less coverage, right? But I think that on the work comp world where I saw it a lot, I think what's common is you're right, misclassification, right? So they're in a cheaper code or not using true payroll amounts. So I think that's something we got to look at too, is like, let's make sure that the payroll I'm quoting matches your actual payroll, matches what that guy or the other person's quoting you. Because if they take 100,000 in payroll out, that's going to change everything.
Yeah. It's always talk about rate because it's just a percentage of your payroll. So you pick the payroll amount. I'll just shop the rate and see where we get the best rate.
Yeah. Let's show you the real numbers, right? Instead of planning. Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Well, we're getting towards the end. So 2 questions I always like to ask is one, if you look at your business journey, what's a lesson you wish you had learned sooner or something you would do different?
The big lesson I think is, and not to pump your the expert interview thing, but to really take advantage of the experts that are around you. I owned a small business, my own small business, prior to getting into insurance. And the biggest thing I've learned working with business owners is the really successful ones are regularly talking to their attorney and their CPA and leaning on people, not trying to do everything themselves, but leaning on people who are good at what they do. You know, they'll use a payroll service, and they'll use, you know, all these services that are out there to help them so that they can really focus on what they do best. And so in starting my own agency, that's something I'm trying to implement is, hey, don't do everything yourself. Build relationships with other professionals who can help you run that business in the correct way. So yeah, it can be lonely to be a small business owner. You feel like you're out there by yourself, but you don't need to be. You can hit people up for free advice and try to get all that expert knowledge that you can, and that'll really help. That's the biggest difference I see between my customers who are wildly successful and the ones that just struggle for years and years on end.
I love that. And you know, it's an important lesson to learn. It's a big ask, right? Like, we're asking you to be okay not knowing something and to be humble enough to ask for help, right? And those, just as people, are hard asks. But I echo that, and I love that was your answer, because, you know, again, I'm always advocating for have really good vendors and amazing relationships, because that's your support system, right? Like, you need a great CPA, you need a great attorney, you need a great insurance agent, you need realtors to help you, you need whatever. Like, if there's a profession, you probably need the person in it to support you. And there's softwares that can help, and there's teams behind that. So like, tap into all this stuff. And you're right, especially if you're a solopreneur or a small team, man, it can feel like you're on an island.
Yeah, you can't be an expert at everything. And the thing that's going to help your business thrive is to be an expert just in that, you know, in driving sales and providing a good service and product in what you do, and then let other people handle it. One of the things that scares me the most, because I'm in kind of a niche of insurance, when I meet an insurance broker and I say, what do you do in insurance? And they say that they write all of it. I do life insurance and home and auto and health insurance and business. Like, that scares me. I'm like, even just in insurance, you can't be good at doing all of that. There's too much to know. So really bringing those experts in who have that specific like niche knowledge is super key, I think.
I love that. So last question, book or podcast people should check out?
I listen to a lot of podcasts as I'm driving around. The one I've gotten into recently that I haven't listened to before is School of Greatness.
Oh, yes.
You know, he's got a wide variety of like people that come on there. So I kind of pick and choose. Some of them get a little woo-woo for me about, you know, the universe and things like that. But they have some really good business-minded people on there. Just some interesting topics. He gets some high performers on there that are always interesting to hear what they're doing. So School of Greatness. He had a really good episode just recently that was about you know, the language you use and how that impacts people in business relationships and sales and things. So check it out.
Well, and such a good recommendation too. And I like you talked about, it's one of those podcasts that has variety. And there are a lot of niche podcasts out there, but I like his podcast because, again, there's like a really big variety of people he interviews and the topics range. So again, you can kind of pick stuff that may resonate with where you're at. I just had a client ask me for a topic, and then I actually listened to a podcast and it was like, this is perfect. So it gives you that ability to share. So great advice there. So guys, below this video will be links to contact and reach out to Mark if you have questions, if you want to talk insurance or just build your network. Mark has an amazing network, so I highly recommend connecting with him. Please like and subscribe to the channel and the video. Leave a comment below. Maybe if you have questions, let us know. We can do a follow-up video. And Mark, I appreciate you taking time, man. I know you're busy. I know you're grinding. I know you're building your agency. And I look forward to having you.
Man, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your help.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Have a good one.